Excellent. Okay. Our next speaker is David Brown. David Brown is an entrepreneur who did time, as we all have, in the French aerospace sector. He worked with Bloomberg before founding Best Exchange Rates, where he remains CEO. Dave is a successful business person and deep thinker, a most excellent, if rare, combination. He'll speak tonight to the theme of universal basic income and the future of tech businesses.
Yeah, Mark contacted me and said, "You work in tech. Do you want to speak about digital policy?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." So thank you to Mark for inviting me here today to give my 2 micro-cents worth on government digital policy and the impact of automation on the future of work. I'll quickly take a look at current government digital policy and the areas where I see that it's keeping Australia back compared to the rest of the world. Then I'll take a look at technology, automation and AI and the impact this might have on the future of work. And finally, I'll discuss the UBI, which has been a utopian idea floating around for almost 500 years, but maybe about to have its time. So who am I? I was actually a year below Mark at Sydney High. You always love the guys in the year above you, so I've been inspired by him all these years, even though I've hardly seen him. But we got back in touch through one of the better aspects of Facebook, through his shameless self-promotion of his side gigs of his one-man shows and his Russian singing. I mean, but as Mark said, after uni I was lucky to get a job in France in the aerospace industry. I was a rocket scientist. I very quickly realised that the French had a very different attitude to technology and engineering. Here in Oz at the time, it was not very cool to be an engineer, as opposed to a doctor or a lawyer. Sorry, Mark. But in France, when I was asked, "What do you do?" and I said, "Je suis un ingénieur," the response was generally, "Ooh la la." So I realised very quickly, this is a very different country to Australia. The role was very James Bond, building rockets, satellites. We had to wear a shower cap and booties to go into La Salle Blanche, the clean room, to see a satellite there. I remember I was working on a project called Poivre, Pepper, and it was a rocket that was going to be launched off the west coast of France, and it was simulating a jet fighter, and they'd have infrared lures that they'd drop off and missiles would be shot at it. And I remember I was in space school, and there was the military attaché from France, and we were at the same table, and as a joke I said that I was designing it as a boomerang. He didn't think it was very funny. So then I moved into finance. Some would say I sold my soul into banking, working at Bloomberg, and then founded a startup called Velocity back just before the dot-com crash. Then ended up in London, and then the GFC. I came back to London with my partner Lai, who's up there. So I've sort of realised I am like a leaf just blown around by recessions. when I deeply look at my life. So then I tired of working for the man, and I started bestexchangerates.com, which is a website that helps you save money on foreign transfers and travel money. See, he's not the only guy who does shameless self-promotion.
It's pretty shameless.
And then through having a startup, I've seen the impact of digital policy can have on the viability of technical startups. So a little bit about digital policy. And I think, I agree with Anne, who mentioned earlier that when the NBN became a political football that was kicked around, that was the beginning of the souring of the relationship between government and technology. And when the ideas boom that never happened, and the word innovation became scary for politicians. The Libs almost lost due to Malcolm Turnbull speaking too much about innovation. Just quickly on digital policy, there's infrastructure, the NBN, it's so slow. My website, when I look at the page load times of all the countries, Australia is 25% less slower than the UK, US, Canada. It's about the same as India, but India's improving. So that's, what's that? There's innovation. In the recent budget, the then Treasurer, Scott Morrison, announced a cut in the R&D tax incentive of $2 billion. He was very proud that he's going to save taxpayers $2 billion over the next 4 years. The French Minister for Higher Education, who was recently in Australia, said France will lift its government spending on R&D to 3% by law. It'll be in law that they have to spend 3% of GDP and focus on disruptive technology. Australia's government spending on innovation has fallen to an all-time low of 0.5%. Then there's security. There's been this mysterious bill that's gone through Parliament called TOLA, Telecommunications and Other Legislation Amendment, which can actually force employees to spy on their companies. I mean, it's all in the name of security and terrorism, but that's going to actually put Australia in the same bed as China in terms of companies worrying about doing business with us. So besides infrastructure, funding and security, a modern digital policy needs to look at the future. What impact will digitalisation, automation and AI have on employment society? I studied AI in the late 80s with Ben, I think he's up there somewhere. And, you know, we developed neural networks that could diagnose measles at 80% accuracy. This is in '89. But then there was a long so-called AI winter for 20 years where nothing really happened, so I moved on to other things. But lately, the impact of Moore's law, new algorithms called deep neural networks have achieved great results, which we can all see. I mean, we can talk to our phones now, we can talk to our houses. I think the future is here. Peter Thiel, the famous Silicon Valley entrepreneur, famously said of the future that we wanted flying cars and all we got was 140 characters. But I think we can see now the future is arriving. And living on a noisy New South Head road, the future of non-horn beeping, driverless electric cars can't arrive soon enough. But what will the impact of automation, algorithms, and artificial intelligence be on work? Will they create more jobs than they destroy? Some studies predict that 40 to 50% of jobs will be replaced by algorithms. If you have a job that's composed of tasks that take about 1 second's concentration, that job's probably already being replaced. And if it's a series of those tasks, or if you have a job where if somebody looked at every decision you ever made and everything that you've ever done and they had perfect memory, would they be able to do your job? If so, you're in trouble. Some people will thrive. The holders of patents would see their earnings soar, wealth and income would become concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer, inequality would become extreme. But what if people left with worthless degrees in hyper-competitive job market? Wages would stagnate, periods of joblessness would get longer. The dole is not designed for this kind of world. Unemployment benefits are temporary and used to encourage people to move into growing industries. The system would falter and would fail if confronted with vast joblessness. A basic income is an obvious solution. So what is a universal basic income? In its purest form, it would be unconditional. A basic income would vary with age, but with no other conditions. So everyone of the same age would receive the same basic income, whatever their gender, employment status, family structure, contribution to society, housing costs, or anything else. I mentioned at the start that UBI is a utopian idea floated around for almost 500 years. In fact, one of the earliest mentions was by Thomas More in his satirical novel Utopia, which is appropriate. In 1516, a Portuguese merchant visiting England remarked how proud the English were at how many thieves were hung. He writes that instead of punishing a poor person who steals bread, it would be far more to the point to provide everyone with some means of livelihood so that nobody's under the frightful necessity of becoming first a thief and then a corpse. So it's been around a while, this idea. The UBI sounds like some idealistic left-wing idea. The reality is it's had long support in right-wing politics and economics. Richard Nixon nearly introduced it. Milton Friedman, one of the most influential champions of free markets and small government, promoted a basic income scheme known as a negative income tax. This right-wing pedigree makes many on the left suspicious of the UBI. What the left feared, not without some justification, is that instead of a UBI being used as a supplement to other forms of service provision, it would be used to replace them. Citizens would then be forced to use their UBI to buy health, education, pension services from private providers. This sort of right-wing UBI would simply be a transfer of public wealth to private businesses, a further marketisation of democratic society. Of course, the UBI needn't work that way, but such concerns mean the design and implementation of a scheme, the politics, are important as the economics. Even in the US, that right-wing neoliberal bastion, the UBI is being discussed. The new cool firebrand of the Democratic Party, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, is discussing it. And Andrew Yang, who is running for 2020 for president, has built his campaign almost exclusively on the idea that America needs a UBI as more jobs are eliminated by the automation and robotics. Yang calls it the freedom dividend. The freedom dividend. What about the UBI in Australia? Would it fly? As an aside, I saw David Marr on ABC 1+1 recently lamenting about how long it took to get the same-sex marriage law passed, and that Australia used to be a place where things happened first in the world, women getting the vote. But what happened? Maybe if we get rid of Tony up the other side, things might change. Aware of the conservation of the electorate, political economists have set out, in Australia this is, have set out what they call a stepping stone approach to implementation. This would involve two initial stages: redesigning Australia's pension system to make it genuinely universal by removing means testing, and then introducing a new youth allowance, a YBI, a youth basic income. They noted the current cost of the pension is $42 billion, making it available unconditionally to all 3.7 million eligible citizens would cost around $78 billion. The increased cost would, according to their idea, be met by a combination of removing or reducing the concessional tax treatment of superannuation and the capital gains tax on the family home, which would also help the young to get into the property market. And then they'd leave a gap in the middle, and then that can grow, depending on, as means allow. Would a UBI stop people looking for work? A former UBI has been running for years in Alaska to distribute the income from oil, and studies have shown no impact on the level of job seekers. Also, an experiment in Finland has found no impact except people are happier. You'd hope so. Through best exchange rates, I've been to remittance conferences and heard reports from UNICEF that in times of disaster, they've had much success sending money boats to remote villages, handing out cash rather than food. And lately in Africa, with the development of M-Pesa, which is a system for transferring top-up balance on mobile phones, there's a startup called Give Directly, which allows you to send money directly to villages in Africa. And they being a Silicon Valley startup, they use technology, they use satellites to actually monitor the number of roofs that are being replaced from thatch to tin and other things that can indicate economic progress. And this does remind me of Mark's show How Deep Is Your Love, when his time at Good Return in the micro-lending charity in Bangladesh, although this is not loans, this is just money. So how would a UBI solve all these issues? Given that all wealth is socially generated, that is to say, is totally dependent on investments in infrastructure, healthcare, education, and the legal system, all citizens have contributed to this over many generations, then it follows that every member of society has a right to share in that wealth. This common wealth argument is greatly strengthened as we continue to transform into an information economy. Increasingly, business relies on access to data in order to succeed. Some have called data the new oil. Most of that data is self-generated. Every time we do something online, use a store loyalty card, turn on our phones. Indeed, companies like Google and Facebook rely entirely on this free labour that we provide every time we update our status update, do a search. My argument then is that just as mining companies pay a royalty or a dividend recognising the economic ownership of the products extract from the earth, a UBI would be a way of recognising the common ownership of the data that tech companies extract from us. The Greek economist Yanis Varoufakis, I was looking forward to saying that name, who took on Europe and Germany almost single-handedly when Greece was struggling recently, has started a pro-democracy movement called DM25. Varoufakis, rather than providing a UBI, which he thinks would be socially corrosive, I mean, if some people are working to pay tax, to pay for other people to sit on a sofa, it could be difficult. He suggests a universal basic dividend, which would be a return of capital to citizens financed by business profits from this social infrastructure of society. The UBI, or dividend, presents itself as a way to totally reimagine the nation's approach to social security and address the structural inequalities that are making Australia a far less fair society. Politicians seem convinced the electorate is scared of innovation. When we vote, we might think about how technology negatively impacts our ability to earn, provide for family, afford to live in Bondi. I believe a universal basic dividend financed from the profits of technological progress would get people on board and excited about the future. Hey, we're all part of the future, together. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave. Together's very proud to have a rocket scientist in its ranks. You wouldn't believe that Dave and I went to the same school along with the current Prime Minister. There we are, temporarily Prime Minister. Now, our last speaker before I deliver a campaign speech on behalf of the Together Party is Kate McDowell. Kate is a superstar, a performer and writer whose name you should remember. Kate last year wrote and performed a fabulous 2-hour one-woman show called Wonder Babes at Norpa in Lismore about the joys and sufferings of young women on New Year's Eve in Byron Bay. Kate's theme is a life in the arts and funding a future. Please welcome Kate McDowell.